this is QuickBooks Online. And like I said, I operate in this universe of QuickBooks. So everything that I do for my clients is cloud-based. So if you have the other version, I can definitely introduce somebody if you're looking for a little bit more on the desktop version, as it's something that I don't really use day to day anymore. So if that's the case, definitely reach out and I can put you in touch with somebody. But for the most part, this is what I see, every day. So when you sign in, this is your dashboard. And what I usually do is just go down kind of what each of these tabs are, what they do, how they relate to you, and then we'll go from there. So on here, this is just a very high level of what's going on in your business. It'll tell you your profit and loss, and these are changeable. You can look at it by month, by year, quarter, so on and so forth. Same for your expenses. And these are any bank accounts that you've connected, meaning you've set them up in your chart of accounts, and then you've also connected them to the bank feed. So then down here, same little tiles, what your sales are, what your income was overall. And then they always have some kind of an advertisement or something going on. In banking, and Geisha, this applies to you with the rules. So the way that banking works is that you're going to connect to, let's say, Chase Bank, and you're going to pull in all of your transactions. And at first, when you connect, it's going to pull in 90 days of transactions. So if you need more than 90 days, you're going to have to go into your bank and actually just download like a CSV to pull it in. So if we were going to do something where you started from the beginning of 2017, you would pull in the 90 days, then you would go back to the bank and pull in the rest. And it's going to give you some transactions to use. And I'm actually, let me see if there's one that I have. No, I don't have another sample company, but I can switch if we need to. So what this is going to do then with bank rules, and these are some kind of general ones, but if you want it to do where every time it sees, let's see, so let's say it's Kelly, right? So my name is Kelly, I'm with Totally Booked. So if every time it sees Totally Booked in the actual transaction data from the bank, so we can say anytime that money leaves my bank, and we're going to use it for all accounts, and the bank text contains. Now this is where it changes a little, Geisha, and this might be where it's a little confusing. So it can be bank text, description, or a dollar amount. The description is what you put in the line or what it feeds from the bank. It won't always be the same. So if Chase reads my name as Totally Boot because it cut off, then that's what's going to have to go here. And then anytime you see Totally Boo, I want you to change it to an expense, making, and this is kind of cool, right? So if you don't already have the vendor in your account, you can then add them on the fly. So I can say, let's add a new vendor, Totally Booked, and I can even add the details if I want to, and I'm going to save that here. And then here, usually people call me legal or professional services, so I would make it legal and professional services. You then have this cool option down here where you can say, every time you see Totally Booked in my bank feed, I don't even want to review it, I just want it to go straight to my books. So you can say, okay, add this here and then save. What that's going to do is every time something comes in from the bank, it's going to automatically add it to your books. What it's also going to do is anything that was sitting in your bank feed, it's going to go back and find them and then push them through for you as well. So this is a really cool feature for stuff like gas. Maybe if you go to the same restaurant because you go to the same networking meeting every week or something, you can always add this rule so that you don't have to keep on reviewing it. It's a real time saver. More than anything else, your QuickBooks subscription is going to be the same every month. You can move that right into dues and subscriptions, stuff like that where it's just repetitive stuff. And then you go into your sales. So for sales, there's different types of sales transactions, but everything in here relates back to a customer. In QuickBooks, you have two real types of people or companies, right? So it's going to be a customer or a vendor. Anyone that pays you is a customer. They make it very, very simple. Anyone that pays you is a customer. Anyone that you pay is a vendor. So even your contractors, your 1099 people, they're all vendors overall. So a lot of people, it's confusing because they'll say, this is business to business. Let's say it's like a service that you use to pay out. Well, this is only business to business. Yes, but I'm Kelly. My company is Totally Booked, but I'm still a vendor. you're paying me on 1099, right? You're going to 1099 me at the end of the year. I'm still a vendor because I've given you my EIN number or my social, and we're reporting a transaction that has gone back and forth between the two of us. I'm operating as a business when I do something like that. So everyone is either a customer or vendor. So in here, they're going to give you a list of all your sales. This is going to show your sales receipts and your invoices for the most part. All right. And here is if we have any invoices, but since we're doing this, we're going to create one. So let's say I want to send my first invoice, and it's going to be to Dreamers and Doers, right? And I'm going to say better together at AOL.com. And it's for, oh, nice. I sell shoes in this company, so it's going to be for pink shoes. And I sell them at 20 bucks a pop, and I'm going to send them 5, right? So their invoice is now $100. The way that I was able to do this is that I had preset up products and services, and I'll touch on that a little bit. So products and services are if you sell products, in this case shoes, or services, in my case, you know, bookkeeping services, but it could also be consulting. It could really be any service that you're providing. You can set up a rate for it. You can set up, you know, an amount per hour, however you want to do it. If it's a product, then you're going to give it a rate as well. And then obviously quantity multiplier, so on and so forth. Now, let's say it was also services. It operates the same way, right? So now I'm going to send this for $50. So now our invoice is $150. When I say save and send really quickly, it's going to say, you know, here's your invoice from my e-commerce simple company. Dear Dreamers and Doers, here's your invoice. And then down here, you have these options to have them pay online. Online payments by card is the same as, you know, processing credit card. So there is a fee involved if you want to sign up for credit card processing. But down here, you have this free bank transfer. So you can turn this feature on, and it costs you no money. They're able then on their side to pay like via e-check, right? So they're going to enter their routing number and their checking account number. And that way, what I have found is when people have the opportunity to pay online, they pay faster. And then also you don't have to worry about chasing the money, and the money is just deposited into your bank. So I usually push my clients to at least turn this on. Personally, I take credit cards. Not everyone does, but it's an option, right? So let's say we say send and close. This goes out into the universe, and now we've sent our first invoice, right? So when we go back to all sales, we now have invoice and my old, you know, sales receipt. Under customers, which is basically anyone that's going to pay me money, I have my client list here. They owe me money. I can see it here. And these little things, by the way, there's 3 little drop-down menu things. You can hide that side menu so you have more space on your screen. But over here, you can also choose what you'd like to see. So if you want to see everyone's email address in this list, you can. If you want to add their addresses, you can. Whatever you'd like. Usually when there's a column chart kind of thing going on here, there's options to add more information. So that, what you can do with that is then you can actually export your list. So let's say you're using QuickBooks, kind of like a CRM, and now you decided you really want to use a CRM. You can take all of your customers with their email addresses and their addresses, and you can export them out of here and put them into a mailing list or a CRM or really anything that you might need it for. And the last one is those products and services. So in this company, we have inventory turned on. So the reason that we're seeing this and what's in stock and out of stock and so on is that. So like these pink shoes, for example, were an inventory item, and then I sold them to Dreamers and Doers. So now I'm really low on my inventory, so it's warning me. But if we wanted to set up a new product or service, right, what you choose here is what's going to determine what happens on the back end. So Lauren, I think it was you that you were interested in more about invoicing. So when you're creating an invoice for, let's say, a service, right? So now I'm going to call this consulting. We don't need a SKU number. Category is not as important when you're adding it to an invoice, but it might be important for your reporting. So if it's something where you want to see, let's see, outside services all together, and you want to save it, the category is more for your tracking and for your needs. So you can really make this whatever is going to be beneficial to you. It's not something that a client is going to see. You will say that you sell this product or service to your customers, and then anything you put here is consulting services from Kelly Gonsalves. This is what's going to go on the invoice line. So this is going to show, like, you know, on this day, this is what we did, this is the amount. Now this gets to the price and the rate that I talked about. So when it comes to price and rate, you can give it a price based on what it is. So let's say this is consulting services and I charge, you know, $100 per hour. And then I want to put it into this income category. So this income category, or this income account, is what ties back to your chart of accounts. So in this case, services is pretty fitting. You would never want to make these too specific. You wouldn't want this to say services for dreamers and doers, services for Birdie, services for Radical Health, right? We don't want it to be where your chart of accounts gets all of these little subcategories. This is very high level. So this is going to track all of your services. That's it, right? So then we're going to say this is going into services. What this lets you do is it's a double-sided entry. If you want to say, yes, I do purchase this from somebody else. So let's say in this case, I had to pay Lauren for this service. I could say the cost from Lauren is $50. And then I'm going to put this into professional services, right? Because I'm asking her to speak. And then Lauren Rosenthal is my vendor, right? So I've added her as a vendor. And now let's say I want to add Lauren, but I also want to make sure that I remember that I have to give her a 1099 at the end of the year. I can go in here and track this and then add in Lauren's, whatever number it is, EIN. It's all way out of whack, but you get the idea, right? So then I can save it. So now I've tracked that I'm paying Lauren for something, and it's going to start to track toward that $600 rule where I have to issue a 1099 at the end of the year, right? So in this case, I'm not actually going to use this, but save and close. And now I've created my consulting services. So when it came down to those categories, which I was saying was really up to you, we can, again, change what we want to see. We can group by category, right? So the only thing that right now has a category outside services is consulting. But if I went through and changed everything, it would show me a list by what those are. So that basically covers the sales module for the most part. And then we get to expenses. So let's say I am hiring Lauren again, and I'm going to pay her by check, and it's coming out of my Chase checking account. And I'm going to hire her for legal and professional services, talk on 8/7, 8/27, and I'm paying her $100, right? So now I've created an expense that's going to hit my bank account directly. So it's going to come back and it's going to pull from Chase checking on 8, you know, it says I paid her on 8/8. So if I wrote this check a week ago, I would change the date. Anytime that you write a check, even if it's a paper check, you should enter it here. What that's going to do is give you a true balance in your checking account. So when I save this, and let's say I just go back in, now it knows that I paid her $100. Now my balance is negative 100 because I started with 0. So when they say knowing your true balance in your checking account, it really has more to do with if you have $1,000 in the bank and you've written a check for 100, and then you go out and you spend 1,000, you are now negative $100. And the reason that so many people screw it up, especially this day and age, is we pay everything with a debit card or we pay everything online, and we don't really track it before. We kind of wait until it all hits our bank account, and then we do it, you know, kind of the backwards way, I would say. And sometimes when you're starting a business, it's really difficult to keep track. So, you know, let's say a vendor only takes paper checks, and you've written them a paper check, but you're not tracking it, you're going to get a little screwed up in what your true numbers are. So it's good that anytime you write a check to enter it here. And then here are your vendors, right? So we spoke about that. So they tried to make these categories so that they tie back to what everything falls under. So if it's an expense, you pay the vendor. Another important thing when you're swiping your debit card, and I know it pulls from your checking account, and you're, you know, swiping your Amex, whatever it is, try to add the names of the vendors as they come in on your bank feed. So you'll have stuff come in, and then you're just, oh yeah, that's gas. Oh, that was a restaurant. Oh, that was food, whatever it is. It's still important to keep track, because if let's say fraud happens, or if I want to go back and see how many times did I pay Lauren last year, it's all going to be under there if I put everything under Lauren's name. How many times did I use Totally Booked? It's all going to be there if I attached it to Totally Booked. If something comes in and I don't give it a name, it just goes to the expense category and I can go look it up that way. But really, it's a lot easier if I could say, okay, I want to see how many times I paid Totally Booked and run a report on it. And again, we have these options here, and we can still export these to get a vendor list. So for the same reason, if you needed to put your customers into a CRM, if for another reason you had to do something where you had to reach out to all your vendors, that's another good way to export all their information. Up here, and it does have this cool new feature. This is new from last year, where you can prepare 1099s at the end of the year. And again, that's going to be anyone that you gave a check mark to. So let's edit Totally Booked, right? Anyone that you check this box off for, it's going to let you prepare that 1099 at the end of the year. Here we go. And then in here, you can also pay your bills, order new checks, which is going to bring you to the Intuit website. New vendors. Import vendors is cool. If you're coming from another system, so let's say you're coming from FreshBooks or Xero or something else, and they let you export your vendors, your customers, anything like that into a CSV or an Excel, you can import them into here. They'll give you a format for what, columns to put everybody in, and then you can pull all of your information in. So I know somebody said that they were doing this all kind of manual. So if you have some crazy spreadsheet somewhere and you need to put all of that info in, you can still get it in here. Workers is really anyone that's going to fall under your 1099 contractor category for the most part, or your employees. So if you were to turn on payroll, which we're not going to do because it costs money, but if you were to turn on payroll, this is where your employees would wind up, right in here. And it would tell you the employee name, maybe some of their information like their last paycheck. You can click into them, you can then edit their salary, you can edit their deductions, all that stuff will be in here. And it'll also be, there'll be a little button up in this top hand corner to let you know when to run payroll. And then in here for your contractors, it's me and Lauren. Sorry, Lauren, I'm using you as my biggest example. So me and Lauren here are your contractors. And the reason we show up here is because we check that 1099 box for them. So if you need to just see your 1099 people, this is where you would come. You can add a contractor here, same idea. Prepare your 1099s, you can inactivate. So on any little drop down here, there's always like a little extra, you can create expense, you can create a bill. So let's say I have now billed this e-commerce client, bill number 1. Let's see, job supplies, wood for building, $100, let's see. Right? And then also what you can do from here, when you click on this, when you click on this, add contractor, what this will do is send a form to the contractor to fill out with their 1099 information. So all you need is their name and their email address, and you can send them this form and it'll say, give us your social IN number, your address, all of your information, and that'll come right back in here. So when you're ready to click the prepare 1099 button, it'll do it for you, which is actually a really nice feature. What else is in here? That's pretty much it. Contractors, workers, fairly simple. And then you have reporting. So the reports that you see are based on what level of QuickBooks you've purchased. So with the Essentials and Simple Start, it's less. This is the full version. This is Plus. This is QBO Plus. So everything that you might need is in here. So they've pieced out into different categories that you can use. Some stuff is helpful for your accountant. You can also do a search up here. Let's say I need an inventory report. You can favorite some and they'll come up top here, which makes it a lot easier for you. But I'll pull just a very simple profit and loss, which is going to show us pretty much nothing because we don't have a lot of data in. But the basis of your profit and loss is your income and your cost of goods, which is a very specific definition of anything that you needed to be able to sell your product. So my cost of goods should be the cost of those pink shoes. Yes. So in here, I purchased the pink shoes. They cost me $20. That's cost of goods. And I'm selling them for $50, right? So that is a direct cost. I couldn't have sold those shoes unless I bought those shoes. Pretty simple. But the rules can be very specific. So it's not, the marketing that I use to put those shoes on the market. It's not the website that I use to put them out there. All of that is an expense to my business. Cost of goods is a very direct cost of the sale. And it also falls into your reports a little differently. So your income less your cost of goods, and then your expenses are bottom level. And then what'll come in down here is any other stuff. So if you, let's say you have a good sized amount of money in the bank and you collect interest on that money, interest is it's like another revenue stream. So it's other income. For me, I have partners that pay me not for bookkeeping services, but for some consulting services or to use their products or whatever it is. That's like a kickback. That's other for me. That's not a main consulting revenue kind of income. And then also balance sheet, I don't think is going to show as much of anything, but I'll pull it up. So inventory assets. So any assets, liabilities, and any equity, any money basically that you have invested into the company, that's all going to show up here, right? So you have your assets, and if we had any money in the bank, that would also show up here because that's an asset. But basically right now it's showing the pink shoes that I had in inventory at 7/31. And it looks like I had 4 pairs in there. So it was $80. And undeposited funds, which I'll show in a little while how that works because it's kind of complicated. Any liabilities are going to be any payables that I have. If I owe money to anybody, any payroll liabilities are going to show up here. So if I run payroll and let's say the taxes are due next week, so it's holding until I pay them, anything along those lines will show up in here. And then equity is if I, to get started, I had to invest money to buy those shoes, right? So I invested my own money, which was $100. So or inventory starting value in this case. If I put, even if it was you put $100 in the bank to start the bank account and then left it there and didn't pull it back out, that was your equity into the company. So anything that came from your personal account, your money to get started, any purchases you made on your personal card, that's all your equity in the company. And you should track it, especially because at the end of the year, your CPA is going to want to know what those things are. Next, we have taxes, which in this, it's not really going to show much, but they do have a sales tax center, and that's my address. So now you guys have it. I do not collect sales tax outside of New York, but if you were, and I don't think any of you guys are, but if you were an e-commerce company, if you were selling online, if you had a website where you sold a product and let's say, they shipped it to another state, these are all things that you would have to fill in. And what this does is it keeps track of every sale that you make and then basically tags the sales tax back to this area. And when you're ready to pay it, it'll say, okay, at the end of each quarter, so like in New York, we have weird sales tax quarters. They start December, January, February, and then we have to pay in March for those 3 months. So in March, I would be making a payment for those 3 quarters. I would come in here and say, okay, show me December, January, February, and how much do I owe? And that's what it's really going to do. So, and I also ask you, right? So I have a client that pays monthly. Let's see. December 1st. Got it. Okay. So what this did is based on my address, it said, okay, so you're in New York, ours is 8.875%. It's going to pull up any taxes that I might have had to remit to the government, right? So somebody paid me on my invoice, and I now have to take the sales tax they gave me. It's not mine, even though it hit my bank account. That's another thing that you have to keep in mind because a lot of people will get paid in full. And especially when you're first starting and you're trying to get cash flow, they may spend that money. So you have to be careful to put it aside and then you pay it back every quarter or every month, right? So that's what this would tell me if I had any sales. It would say you owe X amount for these months. And then they do actually have options where you can have them file it or you can file it yourself. In accounting, you're going to have your chart of accounts and your reconciliation, right? So your chart of accounts is really the backbone of all of the screens that I just showed you, right? In here is where you're going to enter any income streams, any expenses that you might have. And these can be tailored to your business. So I did touch on, don't make them so specific. So you don't want to say income from this client, right? Not income from Totally Booked, income from Dreamers Tours. You really just want to make it consulting, right? Consulting can be an income stream. I had said, you know, my partners that pay me to do different talks or different articles for them, right? So for me, that's another source of income. Any income stream that you have, you would enter it under income, right? So this is where you're going to decide what it is. So let's say it's income. In here, so this, don't let this trip you up because it does confuse some people. But really, it's just either it's a sale of the product or it's a service or it's that other, right, category. But try and use other very sparingly, and that comes to your income, your expenses, anything, because at the end of the year, when you turn in your reports, you don't want it to say that everything was other income or other or miscellaneous category. I try to never use those things. They're not specific enough. They're not going to hold up on a tax return. Your CPA is going to ask you what they are. So try and be as specific as you can when you're filling these things in. So let's say this was my service fee income and it was for bookkeeping, right? And that's kind of it. I can put in here that it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, bookkeeping. That's all I really need. That's it. If you're using sub-accounts, I can say that this could be under, do I have anything in here? Services, right? So this is a service that I offer. I can put bookkeeping under services. But like I said, just try and keep it as high level as you can. And when you save this, and scroll down, here's bookkeeping, right? Any expenses. So in this one, I had changed my expenses to reflect somewhat of an e-commerce company. So I had, you know, Amazon fees and website expenses, stuff like that. Like I said, you can add the categories, just don't make it so that this is like 5 pages. This should not be extreme. And then in here, you also have your reconciliation feature. So this is usually something where I do this for my clients. They don't typically do it on their own, but what reconciling is making sure that you're reconciling your books with your bank account statement. So if it's QuickBooks has this on record and Chase has this, we want to make sure that they say the same thing for those months. So you would do this at the end of the month, usually within the first week of the next month. And you're going to just put it in basically on the bank statement. When you read a bank statement, it's going to say, you know, on January 1st, you had this, and on January 31st, you had this when we closed your books for that month, when we closed your bank account for that month, and then you're going to put in the date. It's fairly simple. Let's say we had 100 bucks on 7/31. We just go in here. We didn't have 100 bucks on 7/31, so I know it's not going to show me anything, but I wanted you guys to see the screen and all the tutorials. You can sort it by payments. So some banks like Chase have the deposits at the top, then they have the checks, then they have the electronic. You can sort it where payments is anything that you spent. You can do your deposits first, and it's going to start to total at the top. So the deposits are going to show, and then you can see, oh, okay, this matches, right? So sometimes when you get to the end, let's say you don't get to 0, the difference should be 0 when you're done. So I'm actually going to do a bank deposit, right? So let's see, we received this from, I don't even know if we have any customers. Dreamers and Doers paid us $100 on 7/27, right? Save and close. Oh, look at me. And then bookkeeping, save and close, right? So now that $100 shows up. So when I'm ready, right, and I click this off, this means that you have succeeded. When you get to 0, you have succeeded. Somebody asked about best practices. Some people will be off by, let's say, 2 cents, 3 cents, and they'll create an account for reconciliation discrepancies. That is not best practice. You should be at 0, and you shouldn't force it. You shouldn't have to go and create an account where you're basically pushing off the error. You really should be going back and saying, okay, did I enter something wrong? I know it can be tedious, but did I enter something wrong? Was something off? So I know some of you said you have bookkeepers and accountants. Look and see if you have a reconciliation discrepancy account by going to your, because we just did this, right? So go to accounting, chart of accounts, just look and see if you have one. You shouldn't have one. If you do, go in there and make sure that if you have one, hopefully it's only a couple of cents, but they haven't just been funneling things in there just to get rid of the discrepancies in the reconciliation, right? So then when I click finish, Yay, you have reconciled your account, right? So now we know that Chase matches at the end of July what Chase said we had. And then also you can come in here, for some of you that are using accountants and bookkeepers and you just kind of want to keep an eye, you can do history by account and it'll show you when it was reconciled, what account it was under, right? So you can choose the different accounts to reconcile. I personally only do banks and credit cards. Some people will reconcile equity, inventory, all these, and it's really depending on the type of the company, but typically my companies only need checking or credit cards. And you can just get a report really of the last time it was reconciled. Keep an eye on this if you're using an accountant or bookkeeper to do your books for you, because they can let these things get behind and then they're kind of cramming them all in at the end of, let's say, a quarter, whatever it is. To catch, what has been most helpful for me is catching fraud, catching any discrepancies. It's when I reconcile the bank, catching the check that wasn't cashed. Let's say somebody, somebody's paycheck wasn't cleared. You can ask your employee, like, hey, did you lose your paycheck? Did something go wrong? Just trying to stay on top of those things rather than 3 months later, they're like, oh my gosh, I never cashed my paycheck and da-da-da. And it wasn't even something that you were aware of, right? This also helps you maintain what's in the bank. You know that when you look at your banking screen over here, let's see if it'll let me see the banking screen. It's not going to show it to me. When you look at your banking screen, you'll be able to see your account balance matches what it should match, right? So all of that is in here. You can see it down here as well for each one. Just keep an eye on it and make sure they're doing it regularly. My accountant only applies if you have an accountant user on your account. So in here, you can send documents. So if you had to send them a bank statement or if they asked you for a bill, something they needed to see, you can send them back and forth here. So like this one says, Kelly will get it because that's my email address. And the way that you would use that in manage users, you have your users and you have your accountant users. Right, so under accountant users is where you would have your outside bookkeeping firm or CPA. It's usually me and a CPA. I use it more regularly than the CPA does, but still we're both in there. We can keep an eye, check the balances. It's just a nice thing to have. So I think maybe I'll just run through the list of questions, or actually I'm gonna touch on this real quick. So these two menus up here, your plus sign is anything actionary, right? So it's something where you're creating an invoice. You're receiving a payment from a customer. You're creating a check or a bill. You can do almost all of them on this side, but let's just say you wanted to go directly to it rather than going to sales, then invoices, then create. You can just create an invoice right here, right? What else is in here? Bank deposit. Oh, so I can touch on undeposited funds. So when you do let's do receive payment. So I'm going to see who owes us money first. Receivable. Okay. So we created that invoice for Dreamers and Doers, right? And now we're in that invoice. We can receive the payment here, right? So there's different ways to do this. You can go to the invoice and receive the payment. You can go here and click receive payment. You can go to sales, customers, Dreamers and Doers, and receive payment. So there's a lot of different ways to get to things, and sometimes it's really just a matter of what your preference is. So let's say I want to receive this payment, and they paid me by check, and it was for this invoice. I can click this off, and it'll automatically take the $150. If it was a partial payment, I can come in here and say it was $100, and then tell it to apply it here, right? So let's say they've only sent me $100, they still owe me $50. Cool. But I'm going to accept this payment, and then I'm going to save and close. Now, actually, okay. Now, so when I did that payment, note here, it went directly to checking, right? So that means that I went to the bank today and I deposited $100. But let's just say that I wasn't ready to go to the bank and I go to the bank every Friday. So now I'm just holding these checks. So I'm going to put that in undeposited funds because it did not go to the bank on August 8th, right? It's sitting in my office. So it's technically not deposited, but I don't want them to open their invoice and be like, why wasn't my, my payment applied? Why does it still say that I owe $150, right? So what this is going to do is going to say that now they only owe $50, but I haven't deposited it yet. Okay, so we're going to say yes, that's fine. And then in this plus sign, we're going to do a bank deposit on Friday, let's say. So coincidentally, I've been holding, Kelly's check for a while, and I've been holding this check, and now I'm ready to go to the bank, and let's say it's going to be on Friday. What this does is these are all the funds that are sitting there, right? They're not yet in the bank. And this trips up a lot of people, but essentially think of it as like a virtual draw in your office, right? Like you keep your checks in the draw and then you go to the bank. Think of it this way. So every time that you take a check and you don't go to the bank, it should be here in undeposited funds. And then when you do go to the bank, you have to make sure to move those funds to the checking account. So this is your undeposited funds, and we're depositing them to Chase Checking on Friday the 10th. And this is it. Like, we received all our checks for the week. We're closing up shop. This is it, right? And then we're going to save and close. So what that does is it moves $145 on my balance sheet from my draw, my undeposited funds, into my checking account, right? And then it still says, hey, we only got a partial payment. They still owe us $50, which we know. But when I go to my reports, I don't know if you remember, there was some money in undeposited funds before. This has changed, right? Well, let's make it as of today. Okay, so now this has changed a little bit. So $145 is still here for today, and I'm going to show you why, right? So we had that $145 in undeposited funds. But if I made this as of 8/11, which is the day after Friday, that money is now going to show in my Chase checking account. So that's exactly what we did. We moved it from undeposited, it's sitting in the draw, to the actual checking account. And that's what's going to matter on your reconciliations. So if you're looking at a reconciliation, if you decide to do it yourself and you're like, I know I have that money in, where did it go? Check your undeposited funds, because it's very possible that you just didn't move it over, or that QuickBooks defaulted to that area and then you're just not sure. Do not duplicate it. If you are sure that you accepted that payment and you know you put it in here somewhere, go find it. Don't just duplicate it, because then that does on your P&L is going to duplicate your revenue, and it's going to look like you're making a lot more money than you are. So that's actually very important. When you put something in undeposited funds, you have to move it to the bank, and if you can't find it, go find it. Do not want to duplicate your revenue. It's not a good thing. Okay, so we talked on some how to run reports, some rules, general QuickBooks, why you should reconcile. It's very important. Make sure that you're keeping track of your stuff on a monthly basis. Product-based, tax laws, lawyer. Okay. I think I've covered most of the things on the list, but if there's something specific, I'm going to open it up to any questions that you guys have. And I'll leave my screen up so I can show you how to do whatever it is you're asking, but just unmute yourself if there's anything you want me to touch on further.
I have two quick questions. One question, there are, as you mentioned, there are different versions of QuickBooks Online in terms of how many features you get. So what do you personally recommend for different, like what makes sense for homes? And then the other question is, so obviously when working with the bookkeeper may initially categorize some of the expenses and income. And let's say there's some feedback that you have or that you want them to recategorize it. Is there an efficient way to do this within QuickBooks? Or is it to go outside QuickBooks? And then also, I think I'm speaking for everyone. This was incredibly helpful. Like, already like learned so much. And you have a very, like, in terms of like how to explain it, it's been like super clear. So 5 stars, and thank you for doing that. That's it on my end.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Was there anybody else, or did you guys want me to go into that? Oh, I'm getting chats. Okay. Oh, that was your question. Okay, awesome. Okay, so very quickly. So when it comes to which QuickBooks option you should use, and I think I'm actually gonna Google this for you, right? Levels of QuickBooks Online. It's based on the type of business that you are. So when you compare the versions, it's really not, so I guess the best deciding factor for me is inventory, right? So if you need inventory, you have to go to Plus. If you don't need inventory, you can usually get away with Essentials or Simple Start. And that goes into if you're tracking bills, you're tracking invoices, right? So if you're only doing invoices and that's it, you can get away with Simple Start. If you need to do something more of an accrual-based accounting where you're putting in a bill from a vendor. So let's say I have billed you for my work. You want to put in that bill, but you don't want to pay me for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. Like QuickBooks trying to sell me on something. So you want to do it where you're going to pay me later on. You won't have that feature in Simple Start. That is only later on. So if you're tracking what you owe people, you're going to need to step up the level that you're using. And then there's also advanced reporting. And like I said, it all kind of depends on what your needs are. But one other deciding one that's a biggie for most people is classes. Class tracking only comes with the plus version. And what class tracking does is it lets you, let's see if I can turn it on for you guys real quick. Accounts and settings. It's in your accounts and settings, and it's under advanced. Here, track classes. So let's say we want to track classes, and we want to do it by the entire transaction and save. And I'll show you exactly what this does. So another cool thing is this search bar up here. You can see the last things that you've done. So you're like, oh, what did I just do? I made a mistake. You can go find it. So let's say I want to take this invoice, and now I want to assign a class to it. So dreamers and doers, let's say, and you can classify anything, right? So this is completely up to you. You can use it where if you want to track your salespeople and you want to be able to pull, let's say, income by this salesperson, you can use it that way. If you wanted to track it by the type of client that this is, you can use it that way. If so let's say dreamers and doers is networking, right? So let's say I speak all over the world and I'm trying to keep track of what who I'm speaking to or who's hired me. Now I can do networking group, right? So this is going to classify this income and tie it to this group of people. That's what class tracking is. And it changes your reports a little bit. And I know we're going to run over. I'm so sorry, guys. But I can then also change this here, customize. And I can give it all these different options. And I can filter now by class, right? So if I say, show me everyone that's in networking group and run report. Okay, run report. Not working. I can swear we categorized it, but whatever the case is, that's what that's going to do for you. Oh, it never saved. Save and close. Continue. Yes. Okay, so now it's saved. And when I customize, filter, class, and say networking group, run report. Now I can see it by class, which is still not working, and I apologize, but I think you get the idea of what it's supposed to do, right? So those are the two that you would go to that like plus size level, right? And that's going to change your costs pretty dramatically, right? It's going to be about double the cost, but it's really only if you need it. So I always tell people, try to start out, I say skip simple start because it's so simple. You're really going to miss out on some of the features, but start with essentials. You can always upgrade. So if it's something that you're not sure, you can always upgrade. So the thing that you had asked, right? So when you are looking to recategorize some, let's say some income or expenses, in the regular version of QuickBooks, it is not actually that simple. So if you're just a user, right? Like you are the user and you want to do these things, if there's no feature in here that makes it that easy, you can go to your chart of accounts. And let's say you want to view, let's say you want to view everything in income. Services, run report. You can click on these individually. That's one way to do it. It's not great, and you can change them here. But if you have an outside accountant or bookkeeper that's using QuickBooks Online for accountants, they actually have this special feature, and I'm going to show you guys what it is, where it's called reclassify transactions. So that's why I push, and most of the people in my community push, use somebody that's certified, use somebody that's using the software, use somebody that knows, what they're doing essentially, right? QuickBooks gives us this tool called reclassify transactions, which makes those things very much easier to do, is the best way to put it. So if I ran this for my entire P&L, and I went into this income, and let's say I gotta get at least one transaction, right? So if I wanted to change this from accounts, job and supplies, right? So I didn't pay totally booked for jobs and supplies, and now I want to move this to professional services, I can. If I want to class it now, even though I didn't before, I can now class it. But you guys don't have that feature. So if you're going to use an outside bookkeeper or accountant, ask them if they're certified in QuickBooks Online, and if they are, they get these features for free. So that's honestly the fastest way to do it. And usually that's like cleanup work where you need somebody to come in and change a whole bunch of stuff over. So this is the fastest way for them to do it, but it's just not common. Like it's not something that they all have access to.
So really quick follow-up question on it. Let's say I'm looking at my books and I see 3 random transactions that need to be reclassified. Is there a way within QuickBooks that I can tag the bookkeeper account and be like, hey, this transaction should go there? Or do I literally have to take a screenshot, mark it up, and then email them about what needs to be done?
So that's what's nice about this My Accountant feature. You can usually, like, I have clients that just send me screenshots and say, like, can we move this over? Can we change this? Can we combine these accounts? And you can go in here and just kind of do it that way. There's no other, like, way to communicate the changes that you need to be. Like, there's no way to tag something, or you can create a class of, you know, look at it, ask my accountant, have her look at it. You can do it that way. Or you can create an account called Ask My Accountant. Some of them actually already have it in there. I always create one. I have one here, Ask My Accountant. So if it's something where you need them to get their attention, put Ask My Accountant and just let them take a look at it at the end of the month. They should catch it when they run your P&L or your balance sheet. Well, oh, why is there money in that account? Let me go see what that is. And then that's somewhere that they can do it for you. Anybody else? So quickly, Geisha, just go back on yours, right? So if I was in here and I wanted to change this, this is probably the fastest way to do it. It's just that when this is really full, right? When you're using a real checking account, you have a lot of different transactions. You can make the change here. So that's one other way to do it. It's just you would have to catch them all, and that's where it becomes a little more complicated. So you can make the changes in your chart of accounts. It's not recommended. It's always supposed to be that you go at the transaction level, but it can be done in here for a quicker, like if it's like 3, you know, obviously you can just go through and find them. That would be the way to do it. Or you can also put it into Ask My Accountant. Anybody else? Any questions?
I have a question. Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Super quickly. So I get a ton of invoices from contractors and folks that we're doing business with. Is there a way, so right now I have it going in through bill pay that then goes into QuickBooks. I don't know if that's the best way to do that, but it also is taking a ton of time because I have to review it and manually put it in and then issue payment.
Okay.
I'm in the weeds.
Okay. So when you get a bill, and this is, again, Simple Start won't have this feature, and that comes into where you should use the different levels. So when you get a bill here, you go enter bill, right? So now, Dreamers and Jewelry, now Lauren, again, has invoiced me for her time, and I would say, you know, whatever it's for. So let's see, what did Lauren do for me? Lauren, travel. So let's say she traveled to speak at a conference for me. Travel to accountant. And her travel came to $1,000. But I'm not ready to pay this, so I'm just going to enter it. Your bill number is whatever the bill number was from the vendor, right? The date that you received the bill. So this was, actually I shouldn't say that, it's the date of the bill. So let's say she invoiced me on August 1st, and the terms are going to be when it's due. So I'm going to pay her in 30 days, and I'm going to save it, right? So now I have this bill in here to save. The answer to your question on when it has to be reviewed and paid and so on, the way to do it in a QuickBooks workflow, and I can tell you about a tool that they offer, they have something called bill pay. So it's similar to if you were in Chase or Bank of America and you would enter that I want to send Lauren $1,000. What you're doing is it's sending Lauren $1,000, then it's hitting your bank, then you're saying, okay, this went to Lauren, I have to look, oh, was it this one? And then, oh yeah, that was for when she traveled, right? So you're getting them on the backside. It's $10 a month, and it's obviously if it's something you're interested in. It's called Bill Pay by Bill.com. It's not Bill.com because Bill.com is actually expensive. It's like $50 a month plus there's fees for every time you send something. Bill Pay by QuickBooks Online or Bill Pay by Bill.com within QuickBooks Online will then give you, it's a little drop down here, and you'll get a new button that says Pay Bills. And what that'll do is it'll let you set up electronic payments, so you can add Lauren to your network. And whenever you're ready to pay Lauren, so let's say it's somebody repetitive, you can send them an electronic payment, or you can do it where you mail them a check and it'll say, that it came from Radical Health and it was for this amount and to please apply it to this vendor, right? So it's still a Bill.com service. It's just offered by QuickBooks, so it's a little bit less money. But aside from that, there's no way to do it in here. If you have to mail a check, it's gonna have to be one of those services. If you want to do e-payments, there's a bunch for those. I can send you guys some codes. There's a lot of different ones. I use Veeam personally. I really love them. They do online payments, but they don't send paper checks. So it really depends on what your needs are. But that would be the workflow then, right? So you would get this new little button that says pay bills, and then you can actually send bills out from QuickBooks. So it eliminates the double, and it's really like, is it worth your time? Like for $10 a month, totally worth my time. I don't have to go into 2 different places. I don't have to recategorize. I've already entered my bill. I know it's for travel. I know it's going to Lauren. It's marking it as paid. It's pulling it from my bank account. It's kind of doing all those things for me. Totally worth the $10 for me. Not everybody, but for me. So that's my solution. Was anybody else?
I have a quick question. So as a business owner, sometimes I don't use my my credit card, my business credit card, or I use personal funds to pay. What is the best practice for keeping track of that? And I'm not going to obviously pay myself back from my business bank account. So would I just put that in equity, or how would you do it?
Yeah, so basically for that, and I had to do it for somebody last week, you should or could pay yourself back. So it depends on how much and like what your comfort level is and what your CPA says you should do. Always listen to your CPA and make sure that you have a good one. So you want to listen to your CPA. And it shouldn't be where it's like, oh my gosh, I have to call my CPA. It shouldn't feel like that. So if that's the case, then maybe look for a new one. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to do, and this is, I guess, a little bit more advanced, but you're going to do a journal entry that's crediting that to equity. So usually what I do is create a due to / due from, and I'm Kelly, right? So I'm putting this on as due to, due from, and it's going to be an equity account, right? And it's personal in out. So my accountant had advised me last year, I was doing personal draw and personal like input or whatever it was, right? And I was using 2 different accounts. What they do is they contra each other. He was like, I'd really rather you just have one account that everything goes in and out of. And I was like, okay, that's a lot easier for me too, right? So anytime that I did something where, let's say I spent, or I shouldn't say I spent, let's say I gave myself a distribution because I'm an LLC, it would come out of this due to, due from, right? So what that is going to counter is whatever you've created for it, I guess is the best way to put it, right? So if it's a due to, due from, and it came out of your checking account, and it should have hit this account, so it was a personal expense or it was a draw, it should be debit and credit for these 2 accounts, right? So that's the best practice for it. Best practice overall is to not really spend your personal expenses through your business. So those shouldn't really show up there. But if you do wind up the other way around where you are, you're spending your personal money or you're investing your personal money, you want to make sure that it hits that account. And like I said, at the end of the year, they're going to say you've hit your limit, you've done too much, you've done too little, this is what it should look like. And that's all going to balance out, because usually the one that's doing your business, if it's, if you're a sole proprietor or sole owner, it's usually going to show up all on your tax return anyway. So you're going to want them to really show you what it should and shouldn't be. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? No? Okay. All right. So I guess we're going to wrap up. So I'm just going to like pull up my website. You guys have it. So, and I'm doing this more for if you guys have any additional questions, if you think of anything after the fact. So you go to my contact information down here. You can just put 20 minutes on my calendar. Totally free if you just have questions for me. And yeah, I don't even think it has my phone number on there, I'll be honest. No. Yep, you can email me right through there. So if you guys have any questions, I'm in obviously the members group, anywhere on there, just, give me a shout.
You're amazing. Thank you. Thank you from all of us.
No worries. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.